What if the man sitting before you had already been buried at sea? And when Captain Rogers finally speaks, will he reveal the truth or prove he was never alive at all? Welcome to Classic Storytime Hub. Tonight's story is Captain Rogers by W. W. Jacobs, a classic mystery story, reimagined and retold for the modern age. The bridge was old. The stones beneath his feet had forgotten the sound of hurried steps long ago. He crossed it slowly, deliberately, as if each step cost him something he couldn't afford to lose. He didn't look at the river. He never looked at the river. The darkness down there was the kind that looks back. Ahead, the town flickered, dim, distant, barely alive, but it was there. He kept walking. His stockings were more whole than fabric. His coat, once fine, perhaps, now carried the rust of too many roads, too many seasons, too many nights with no roof. But somewhere near the end of that bridge, something shifted in his spine. He straightened, squared his shoulders, walked in like he owned the street. 4 taverns faced the quay in a crooked row, their signs swaying in the October air. He passed the first without a glance, a beer shop, nothing more. He slowed at the second, the third, measured them with those eyes of his. Then he saw it, the Golden Key. Its gilded sign caught the last of the light like a quiet boast, the finest house in Riverstone, the kind of place that didn't welcome men who looked like him. He adjusted his coat anyway, walked in anyway. The coffee room was empty. A fire burned in the hearth, generous, crackling, indifferent to who was watching. He pulled a chair close, lifted his ruined boots onto the fender, and let the heat find the gaps in his soles. He was still. The waiter appeared in the doorway, took one long look, planted himself there like a wall. "Brandy and water," said the stranger. "Hot." "The coffee room," said the waiter, voice tight with contempt, "is for gentlemen staying in the house." A pause. Then the stranger took his feet off the fender. He rose slowly, no rush, no anger on his face, just that stillness. He walked toward the waiter, and the waiter, without quite understanding why, took a step back. The man was short, thin. There was nothing physically imposing about him, except his eyes, brown, flat, still as stone at the bottom of a well. "Brandy and water," he said, again, quieter this time, "hot, and plenty of it." A beat. "Do you hear me?" The waiter turned to leave. "Stop." One word, but it landed like a hand on a shoulder. "What's the landlord's name?" "Mullet? Send him to me." He was already walking back to his chair. "And you," he didn't turn around, "mind how you speak to people. Next time, I won't ask twice." He stirred the log with the toe of his boot. Sparks rushed up the chimney like they were escaping something. The door opened. The landlord filled the frame, a large man, a loud presence, the waiter hovering like a shadow behind him. But the stranger didn't look up. He watched the embers breathe and glow, patient as a man who has learned that the room always comes to him eventually. "What do you want?" The landlord's voice came from somewhere deep in his chest. The stranger turned. A thin face, yellow pale, old in ways that had nothing to do with age. He smiled, not warmly, the way a man smiles when he already knows how the conversation ends. "Send that fat fool of yours away," he said softly. "Then we'll talk." The landlord had heard that voice before. He didn't move, didn't speak, just looked. The way a man looks at something he buried a long time ago and hoped the ground would keep. Then, slowly, he turned to the waiter. A single gesture. "Leave us." The door clicked shut. Silence. "You didn't expect to see me, Rogers." The name hit the room like a stone dropped into still water. "My name is Mullet." Flat, final, a wall of a voice. "What do you want?" The stranger tilted his head, blinked, let a slow smile crawl across that yellow face. "Rogers," he repeated softly, as if tasting the word. "My mistake, then. I was looking for an old shipmate, Captain Rogers." A pause. "Though I imagine Rogers was hanged years ago. Men like him usually are." He glanced up. "You wouldn't happen to have a brother by that name?" The innkeeper stepped forward. "What do you want?" The stranger leaned back in his chair, unhurried, unbothered, like a man who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times on 1,000 cold roads. "Since you're asking so kindly," he counted on his fingers. "New clothes, hot food, a proper bed, and money, enough to fill both pockets." "Then I suggest you keep walking. You won't find any of that here." The stranger arose, slowly, deliberately. "There was 100 guineas on Roger's head, 15 years ago, maybe more." He moved toward the door. "I suppose I'll find out if it's been collected yet." The innkeeper's jaw tightened. Something moved behind his eyes, something large and dangerous pressing against a locked door. He held it there, kept his voice even. "If I gave you 100 guineas, it would never be enough." The stranger stopped, turned, and smiled, wide, genuine, delighted, the smile of a man who has just heard exactly what he came to hear. "There it is," he breathed. "You read like a book, you do." He was still smiling when his hand went into his coat. The pistol came out, long and slow, because the innkeeper, that enormous, immovable man, had begun very quietly to move toward him. "Keep your distance." No theatrics, no trembling, just those 4 words, sharp as a blade laid flat on a table. The innkeeper stopped, looked at the pistol, looked away. He crossed to the bell pull with the calm of a man who has faced worse, rang for the waiter, ordered spirits, set down the glasses. He looked between the 2 men, felt the weight of something ancient and unspoken in that room, and left without a word. The stranger lifted his glass. His eyes didn't leave the innkeeper's face. "To Captain Rogers," he said with something almost like reverence, "and may he never get what he deserves." Silence. Then, "Which prison did you come from?" The stranger exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh. "So many," he said softly. "I've lost count of them all. Every one of them a detour." He set down his glass. His eyes settled, flat, still, certain. "I walked from London 280 miles,
more or less. His eyes settled, flat, still, certain. All of it to see that ugly face of yours again. He leaned forward. And now that I've found it, a quiet smile, I'm not leaving. A beat. Give me money.
No argument. No hesitation. The innkeeper simply reached into his pocket, set the coins on the table, and slid them across. The stranger watched them come to rest, picked them up, pocketed them one by one without counting. "Enough for now," he said. "But from here on," he leaned forward just slightly, "halves, everything, half of all of it." His eyes didn't blink. "And I'll be here to make sure I get it." He sat back, replaced the pistol inside his coat, and met the innkeeper's hatred with something worse than hatred, with ease. "A fine harbor," he said, looking around the room with something like satisfaction. "After all those years at sea, shipmates once, shipmates still. While Nick Gunn draws breath, you'll never be lonely, Rogers." The fire crackled. The innkeeper said nothing. "Do you remember the Dutch brig?" Gunn's voice softened, almost nostalgic. "The mate. God, the look on that man's face." "I don't remember it." Flat, immediate. "I don't remember any of it." The innkeeper's eyes held steady. 15 years. 15 years of a decent life, a clean life. A pause, long, deliberate. "Pray for your own soul, Gunn. Pray that whatever is still sleeping inside me stays asleep." Gunn waved a hand. 15 years. He said it like it was nothing, like it was a long nap on a Sunday afternoon. "What a gift I am to you then, someone to remind you who you were before all this." He gestured vaguely at the walls, the fire, the respectability of it all. Then he stopped. His eyes moved to the door. A girl stood in the frame, 18 perhaps. She hesitated for just a moment before crossing the room toward the innkeeper. Something in her face was careful, watchful. Gunn rose. The bow he offered was too slow, too deliberate, the kind of courtesy that isn't courtesy at all. "I'm busy," said the innkeeper, a warning wrapped in 2 words. "Our business is done," Gunn said pleasantly. He kept his eyes on the girl. "Is this your daughter?" "My stepdaughter." Gunn placed a hand on his chest, the hand missing 2 fingers, and bowed again. "An old friend of your father's, fallen on difficult times, I'm afraid, but your father, generous soul that he is, has kindly invited me to stay a while." The girl looked at Gunn, then at the innkeeper. She felt it, the thing in the room that had no name. "Any friend of my father's," she said, her voice perfectly polite and perfectly cold, "is welcome." A small bow, and she was gone. The door closed. Silence settled back over the 2 men like dust. "You still intend to stay?" Mullet said, not a question. "More than ever." Gunn's eyes lingered on the door, then drifted back, slow, deliberate. "You don't think I'm frightened of you, do you, Captain, after everything?" "Life is sweet," the innkeeper said quietly. Gunn nodded. "Sweet enough," he said, "that you'll share it with me to keep it." "No." The word came out still, unhurried, like a stone set down on a table. "Not for that reason." Gunn opened his mouth. "No sermons," the innkeeper said, and there was something in his voice now, something deep and old and not entirely tame. He looked at Gunn the way a man looks at a fire he once started and never quite put out. Gunn smiled anyway. "Cheer up, you old wolf." He raised his glass. "Look like a man who's just found a friend he'll never lose again." The fire breathed. The innkeeper looked at him and said nothing at all. Gunn waited. His hand drifted toward his pocket again, the old habit, the old leverage. But the innkeeper wasn't looking at him. He was looking at the fire. Eyes flat, jaw set, something moving behind his face that had no interest in being seen. "That's what 15 years of honest living does to a man," said Gunn softly, almost to himself, almost amused. No answer. The innkeeper stood, crossed the room, opened the door. "Landlord." Gunn's maimed hand came down on the table, sharp, deliberate, like a gavel. The innkeeper turned, said nothing, just looked. "Supper," said Gunn. "The best you have, and a room." A pause. "The best one." The door closed without a sound. It opened again a little later, the waiter, George, moving with the careful steps of a man who had already decided he wanted no part of whatever lived in this room. He laid out the food. Gunn cursed him for being slow, cursed him for being clumsy, then pulled his chair to the table and ate. He ate the way a man eats who has spent too many nights wondering if he would. When it was over, he sat by the fire for a long while, smoking, legs stretched across the fender, watching the embers like they owed him something. Then he rang for a candle and went to bed. The room they gave him was fine. He didn't trust it. He checked every corner, every shadow, behind the curtains, beneath the bed, inside the wardrobe, slow, methodical, thorough. Only when he was satisfied that the room held nothing but itself did he close the door. He locked it, then tilted a chair beneath the handle anyway, then slid the pistol under his pillow, then, and only then, closed his eyes. He was asleep before the candle burned down. He was up before the house. The coffee room had been laid for him, a careful, deliberate separation, a message without words. His brow darkened. He walked the hall, tried doors, found the small sitting room at the back, warm, quiet, ordinary in the way that only private things are ordinary. The innkeeper sat at the table, the girl beside him, breakfast between them like a small domestic peace. Gunn walked in, pulled up a chair, sat down as if he'd been expected. The innkeeper served him without a word. The girl reached for the coffee, and her hand, just slightly, was not steady. Gunn noticed. He always noticed. "Finest bed I've slept in," he said pleasantly, wrapping both hands around his cup. "I'm glad you rested well," said the girl. Her voice was civil, careful, a door held shut from the inside. "Like a child," said Gunn. He looked across the table at the innkeeper. "A clean conscience does that for a man, doesn't it, Mullet?" Not a question. The innkeeper nodded, kept eating. Gunn ate too, slowly, unhurried. His eyes moved to the girl at the head of the table the way a man's eyes move to a fire in a dark room, drawn and not entirely in control of it. She excused herself when the meal was done. The door closed behind her. Gunn watched the space she left. "A beautiful girl," he said quietly. "No mother, I take it?" "No mother." Gunn shook his head, sighed, almost theatrical, almost sincere. "Tragic," he murmured. "No mother, and a guardian like you." He let that sit for a moment. Poor creature, if she only knew. He reached for his cup. "We'll have to find her a husband." The fire crackled. The innkeeper said nothing, but his hand, flat on the table, pressed down slowly, steadily, until the knuckles went white. He looked down. The coat, the shoes, the rust and ruin of everything he was wearing. His hand went to his pocket, heavy now, heavier than yesterday. He glanced once at the innkeeper, then walked out into the morning without a word. He came back an hour later. New coat, new boots, new everything, head to foot, as if the man who had crossed that bridge in the dark had simply been discarded, left somewhere on the road behind him. He found Mullet at his accounts, sat down across from him, offered to help. The innkeeper paused, then said nothing and slid the ledger across. He didn't speak when Gunn's eyes lit up at the numbers, didn't react when Gunn helped himself to more gold from the strongbox, leaned back in his chair, and shouted for George to bring him something to drink. He simply turned the page and kept his face unreadable. A month. That was all it took. 1 month, and the golden key belonged to Nick Gunn in every way that mattered. The sign still bore the old name, the deed still bore the old name, but the man who moved through those rooms, who sat at the head of the table, who barked orders at the staff, who made the maids look away when he smiled, that man was Gunn. Mullet's resistance had not broken, it had dissolved. Slowly, quietly, the way old wood goes, not all at once, but fiber by fiber, until one day you press your hand against it and find nothing solid left. Every objection he raised, Gunn answered with a word, a name, a date, a memory dredged up from 15 years ago and laid on the table like a blade. And for Joan's sake, always for Joan's sake, Mullet said nothing more. His health began to go. Joan watched it happen and didn't have the words for what she was watching, only the feeling, cold, growing, shapeless, that something was closing in. Gunn's appetite for power had no floor. The maids learned his moods the way sailors read weather. By the time you were certain, it was already too late. His smile meant nothing good. His politeness meant something worse. The men gave him wide berth and wide silence. George lasted longest. 10 years he had worked those floors, 10 years of early mornings and late nights and loyalty that had never once been questioned. Gunn dismissed him on a Tuesday, casually, the way you'd set down a cup. George went to Mullet. Mullet confirmed it. And when Joan, standing right there, Gunn watching from his chair, turned on her father with fire in her eyes, the innkeeper looked back at her with eyes that had already gone somewhere far away. "He was rude to my friend," he said. The words came out hollow, rehearsed, like a man reading from a script someone else had written. "He was rude," said Joan, "because Mr. Gunn deserved it." Gunn threw his head back and laughed. The sound filled the room, too large for it, too comfortable in it. "God, I like you," he said, slapping his knee, "a girl with fire in her." He leaned forward, elbows on knees, and looked at her the way he looked at ledger numbers, calculating, satisfied. "Here's my offer. You ask me to let George stay," a slow smile, "and he stays. A gift. For you." The room went quiet. Joan turned to her father, fully, deliberately, the way you turn to someone when you need them to be something they used to be. "Who is master here?" Mullet laughed. It was the worst sound in the room. "This is business," he said, and the lightness he attempted was painful to hear. "Women don't understand these things. Gunn is valuable to me. George has to go." Joan stared at him, stared at the stranger her father had become. "Unless," said Gunn softly from his chair, "you ask nicely." She looked at her father one last time. He turned away. His foot tapped against the floor. Once, twice, the small, restless gesture of a man who has chosen not to choose. She left. And as she passed through the door, Gunn held it open for her, wide, deliberate, a performance of courtesy that was its own kind of cruelty. She drew her dress aside so it wouldn't touch his hand. The door closed. "Magnificent girl," said Gunn quietly. His lips moved after the words, like he was tasting something. "That kind of spirit," he paused, "it's going to be satisfying to watch it go." "She's young," Mullet said, too quickly. "She doesn't—" "She looked at me," Gunn's voice dropped. "Like that." Something shifted behind his eyes. "She does it again, I'll put the lot of you in the street, her included, every last one." He let the image settle in the room. His fists were closed, but he didn't move. He watched the innkeeper the way a man watches a wall he suspects might still be load-bearing. Something crossed Mullet's face, just for a moment. Something old, something that had been buried under 15 years of decent living, and it was, it turned out, not entirely dead. Then it was gone. He sat down. His hand found his chin. His fingers moved against it, nervous, mechanical. "One word from me," said Gunn, watching him with open satisfaction, "and you hang. Your money goes to the crown." A pause. "And then what happens to her?" Mullet laughed. The sound had nothing in it. "You'd be killing the goose," he said. "Don't lean on that. Flat, final. I don't stop when I'm balked. You know that about me." The innkeeper looked up. There was something almost pleading in it. "Let's not do this," he said, and his voice was barely his own. "She's young. She spoke out of turn. Let it go." Gunn looked at him for a long moment, then straightened, smiled, slow, contemptuous, satisfied in a way that needed no audience, and walked out without a word. After that, the golden key began to die. Not loudly, not at all at once, the way a fire dies when no one tends it, quietly, steadily, until one morning you come downstairs and find only cold ash where the warmth used to be. Gunn filled the house with his own people, maids that answered to no one but him, men whose language made the walls feel dirty. The old regulars stopped coming, one by one, then all at once, until the guest rooms stood empty, and the silence in them had a particular quality, the silence of things abandoned. The staff barely looked at Joan anymore. The maids ignored her orders. The men spoke to her as if she were no one. And Mullet, who had once been the fixed point around which the whole house turned, retreated further and further into himself, declining every appeal, deflecting every crisis, his body beginning to say what his voice no longer could. He complained of dizziness, once, then again. Joan noticed, filed it away with all the other things she was carrying. The day it happened, she was running toward him, not walking, running, the way you run when something has finally broken past the last of your endurance and you need more than anything to find the one person who was supposed to protect you. She pushed open the office door. He was on the floor, folded against the wall behind the door like something discarded. The big, broad man she had known her whole life, reduced in an instant to a heap of cloth and labored breathing. She screamed for help. They came, the new staff, Gunn's people. They stood in the doorway and looked at the man on the floor with the blank, unhurried faces of those who had been taught that nothing here concerns them. One of them said something. Joan would not remember the words, only the laughter. Then Gunn was there, shouldering through them, looking down on the senseless body of the man who had once been Captain Rogers.
He turned him over with his foot, the way you'd turn over a log to see what lives underneath. Cursed once, sharply, then told them to take him upstairs.
She didn't let go of his hand. Not once. While they waited for the surgeon, Joan knelt by the bed and held on to those thick, familiar fingers, now slack and unresponsive, as if her grip alone could keep something from slipping away. Around her, Gunn's people moved through the room with the casual ease of those who have already decided what this place is and who it belongs to. She held on. The surgeon arrived, said little, did less, but under his hands and after a long, suspended silence in which the room seemed to hold its breath, the innkeeper stirred. The eyes opened. Unfocused, searching. The eyes of a man returning from somewhere very far away and not yet certain he recognizes where he's landed. Gunn cleared the room, cornered the surgeon, asked his questions in a low, urgent voice. The answers came wrapped in Latin and evasion. Rest, quiet, no agitation of any kind. Joan would nurse him. More help would come. It came by evening. An elderly woman, broad, efficient, the kind of efficiency that has long since made its peace with mortality. She walked in, punched the pillows into shape, hard enough to jostle the man back to consciousness, then uncorked a bottle of medicine, tasted it herself first with the brisk professionalism of someone who trusts no one, and administered the dose. Her presence in the room felt less like care and more like preparation. He rallied. Then he began slowly and without drama to fail. The intervals of clarity grew shorter, the confusion between them grew deeper, and in those brief windows when his eyes focused and the fog lifted, what lived there was not the man who once silenced a room with a look. What lived there was something diminished, something frightened, something that watched Gunn move through the doorway and tried, with trembling urgency, to make itself agreeable. The hands that had once been a legend in this town, hands that men still talked about carefully, now moved without purpose across the coverlet, restless, searching, finding nothing. Joan watched it happen every day. She took her meals in the sick room. She slept in the chair by the bed when she slept at all. She did not go downstairs unless she had to, and when she did, she moved quickly and came back quickly, because downstairs had become somewhere else entirely, somewhere with different rules and different faces, and a particular kind of laughter she had learned to dread. Gunn's attentions had grown less careful about concealing themselves. She noticed. She said nothing. She went back upstairs. Gunn had a problem. A dead mullet was worth nothing to him. The money, the house, the leverage, all of it depended on a living man with something to lose. He needed time. He needed the innkeeper breathing and conscious and afraid. He asked the surgeon directly. The surgeon looked at him for a moment, then looked away and said nothing useful. The nurse had no such reservations. 4 days, she said, with the calm of someone announcing the weather. 4 days at most, though he could go at any moment, mind you. They do that sometimes, just to be contrary. Gunn let 1 day pass. On the second, he waited. He watched the corridor, watched the sick room door, waited until Joan's footsteps faded down the hall, until the silence on the other side of that door was the silence of a man alone. Then he went in. The innkeeper's eyes were open, and this was the thing that mattered. They were clear. Gunn stood over the bed and looked down at the wreckage of the man who once put a pistol in his face without flinching. "Still here," he said. His voice was low, almost conversational. "Cheating the rope, are you? Something moved in his expression, not quite anger, not quite fear, something that lives in the space between the two. "I'm going to the magistrate, today. I'm going to tell them everything." The words fell into the room like stones into still water, and the innkeeper, pale, diminished, barely able to lift his head from the pillow, looked back at him, listening. The effort it took was visible. Every muscle, every last reserve. He turned his head, slowly, as if it weighed more than it should, and found Gunn's face with those eyes, still in them, despite everything, still something human. "Mercy," he breathed. The word barely made it out. "For her sake. Give me a little time." Gunn's expression didn't change. "Time to die quietly, you mean?" He leaned closer. "Where is it? The money? Where have you hidden it?" Mullet closed his eyes. The room waited. When they opened again, something was moving behind them, slow, deliberate, the last working machinery of a mind trying to find a way through. "Tonight," he murmured. The words came out thick, dragged up from somewhere deep. "Come tonight. I will make your fortune." A pause. "But the nurse, she watches." "I'll handle her," said Gunn. The grin came easily. "Tell me now, in case you don't last." The innkeeper's breath came shallow and fast. "Joan," he managed. "You'll give Joan a share." "Yes." Instant, impatient. "Yes, of course." He tried to rise. The body refused. He fell back against the pillow just as the sound reached them both. Footsteps on the stairs. Joan's footsteps, unmistakable. Gunn straightened, shot a look at the man in the bed, sharp, wordless, a warning that needed no translation. Then he moved to the door and blocked it with his body, reaching for her as she came through. She stepped past him, came to the bed, sank to her knees, and took her father's hand in both of hers, and wept over it, quietly, the way people weep when they have been holding it in for too long, and the body simply decides it's done. The innkeeper made a sound, low, involuntary. A shiver moved through him from somewhere far inside. Past midnight, the house had gone quiet in the way old houses go quiet, not peacefully, but completely, as if the darkness had swallowed every sound and was holding it somewhere. Gunn sat on the edge of his bed, waited. Then, slowly, carefully, reached down and removed his shoes. The landing was black. One thin line of light leaked from the sick room door, left ajar. Everything else was shadow and silence and the sound of his own careful breathing. He moved along the wall, reached the door, looked in. The nurse was in her chair by the fire. She had slipped down in the seat, her head dropped forward onto her chest, her hands loose in her lap. On the small table beside her, a glass. On the mantelpiece above, a single candle burning low, throwing a pale and sickly light across the room. Gunn stepped inside, checked the bed. The innkeeper was still, eyes closed, breathing shallow. He crossed to the nurse, stood over her, studied her the way he studied everything, looking for the angle, the weakness, the truth of it. He lifted her by the shoulders. Her head dropped sideways over the arm of the chair, boneless, absolute. From the bed, barely audible, "Dead?" Gunn looked at her a moment longer, then back at the man in the bed. "Sleeping," he said, and smiled. Drugged, said Gunn. One word. Clean. Final. Now talk, and be quick about it. The innkeeper's eyes drifted toward the nurse again. The servants, drunk, all of them. Gunn bit the words off one by one. The dead themselves couldn't wake them. Now will you speak? A silence. I have to take care of Joan. Gunn's fist came up, clenched, shaking. Your money is... The voice was fading, fraying at the edges. Swear to me, on your oath, Joan. I'll marry her, Gunn snarled, and the contempt in it was total. She'll have whatever I decide to give her. That's all you're getting. Now where is it? Where is the money? Where? He bent down. Closer. Closer. Mullet's eyes opened one last time, moved slowly around the room, came to rest on Gunn's face. And he whispered. Gunn leaned in until his ear was almost at the man's lips. He never heard the words. What he felt instead was a hand that closed around his throat like a trap springing shut, and an arm like an iron bar coming down across his back and driving him flat against the bed with a force that had no business belonging to a dying man. No business at all. You fool. The voice in his ear was not the voice of a sick man. It was not the voice of anyone who needed mercy. Captain Rogers, at your service. Now shout it. Shout my name to anyone who listen. Go on. Gunn's hands scrabbled at the sheets. His legs kicked. Nothing moved. The thing on the bed rose in the bed, rose with a slowness that was somehow more terrifying than speed, and with one clean motion threw Gunn onto his back and stood over him, one hand still at his throat, looking down with eyes that had waited 15 years for this exact moment. I thought you were clever, Gunn. The whisper was almost gentle now. Almost. You're not. You never were. The grip tightened, fractionally, deliberately. The moment you threatened me, I decided. When you threatened Joan, something moved behind those eyes, something vast and cold. I wished you had 9 lives. A pause. Keep still. He glanced once at the nurse, her head still on her chest, the glass still on the table, the candle still guttering on the mantelpiece. Then he put his weight down, and he talked, quietly, conversationally, the way a man talks when he has all the time in the world. You drugged her for me, Gunn. I want you to know I appreciate that. The figure beneath him had stopped twisting. Tomorrow morning they'll find you in your room, dead, and if one of the rats you brought into my house hangs for it, a pause, all the better. He looked toward the door, held it. I'm feeling stronger already, as you can tell. A month, I think. A month, and I'll be back on my feet. The candle breathed. The nurse slept on. The thing on the bed went still. He waited. Then he rose, gathered the dead man in his arms, carefully, quietly, the way you carry something you don't want to drop, and walked him down the dark corridor to his room, laid him on the floor, arranged him into the shape of a man surprised, put his shoes on him, turned his pockets inside out, placed a single guinea on the floor where it would catch the morning light, nudged a rug out of place with his foot, went downstairs, found the small door at the back of the house, opened it. A dog erupted into barking somewhere in the dark. He closed the door, went back upstairs, got into bed. The nurse woke at dawn, stiff, cold, mortified. She rebuilt the fire with the brisk efficiency of a woman protecting her reputation, measured out the dose that should have been given hours ago, and tipped it away, smoothed her dress, settled back into her chair. Through half-closed eyes, Captain Rogers watched every move she made, every unconscious, innocent, perfect move. Then he turned his face to the wall, pulled the blanket up, and waited for the sound that was coming,
the sound of someone finding what he had left to be found.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.